Welcome back to Firewall. I'm your host, Bradley Tusk. It is technically it's technically not a Tuesday episode.
No.
With us either way is our friend and producer, Hugo Lindgren.
I don't appear just on Tuesdays.
No, but just he actually exists in outside of that. But the answer is that we're recording this on Monday as usual. We are going to release this on Thursday because it is a long episode solely focused on the New York City mayor's election and a Mamdani mayoralty. And the reason we're not just putting this up tomorrow is election day. And we'd like to avoid a Dewey defeats Truman scenario.
Right.
And so
the odds on that looking quite long.
Yeah, I think so.
I wonder what Polymarket would have said about Dewey Truman.
But they had Cuomo way up in the primary till sort of the end, right? So who knows?
Day of, right?
I don't remember that, but I remember that the early voting, I think, started to move the odds there. But either way, so here's what
what are we doing?
So when you're hearing this Thursday, Wednesday, Chris Coffey, Jamie Rubin, and I are going to do an early morning reaction to the election that we'll just put up pretty much immediately. Also on Wednesday, I will have released a Substack that is kind of like it's an experiment for us. It's like a mini magazine on Substack. Mm-hmm. I wrote 6 columns about the mayoralty that we're going to go through quickly today. So the first one was a letter from me to Zohran with some thoughts. The second was advice for young people entering administration. The third is entitled Zohran and the Jews. The fourth is how the press should think about covering Zohran. The fifth is why the interests of the poor and the DSA conflict and how Zohran will handle it. And the sixth is what Steve Fulop, who is the new head of the Partnership for New York City and the former mayor of Jersey City, needs to do to make the partnership relevant and effective again. And then we'll also link to some older pieces, one with Jamie from Vital City, and a few other Substacks and podcasts and stuff like that.
And the whole thing will be linked in the show notes of this episode.
Correct.
If people
you
don't
can find
subscribe to your Substack, which they should.
But why not just subscribe? Guess how much it costs? Nothing. It's free.
What a bargain.
So, Hugo, I guess the plan is I'm just going to talk through these, and you've obviously read this a couple of times. You're going to jump in with questions.
Right. So let's start obviously with the top thing, your letter to Zohran. What do you want to say to him?
So, I'll skip the opening because you guys can read it, but the point is, a lot of people are giving this guy advice, presumably right now, and the last thing he probably needs is more advice from me. With that said, for better and worse, I suspect I see the world and politics and government differently than most of the people around him. Mm-hmm. I've probably been at it a lot longer than a lot of people around him. And I think to be effective in a job like mayor, you have to be able to and willing to hear and entertain different viewpoints. I think one of the reasons that de Blasio was politically successful and that he won 2 terms, but broadly unpopular the entire time and has not much of a legacy, is he only listened to people who already agreed with him, and that was enough to sort of get reelected, but not enough to be effective as mayor.
Okay, so what do you want Zohran to hear from?
So the first one, and to me this is maybe the most important thing in this entire episode, is just there's only one mindset that will guarantee that he will be an effective mayor, and that is to understand that this is both the best and last elected job he will ever have. No New York City mayor has ever won an election after being mayor. So this is true since the consolidation of the 5 boroughs in 1898. Some guy in 1869 became governor. But John Lindsay ran for president, Rudy ran for president, Mike ran for president, de Blasio ran for president, Koch ran for governor. De Blasio ran for Congress from his own district, Park Slope, and came in 6th in the primary. Eric Adams didn't even get to the ballot for a second term effectively. So
dead-end job.
Someone will be the first to defy a trend that is true. But overall, if Zohran just governs saying, all I care about is making the right choices for New York City, rather than calibrating his actions on re-election or some future potential election, he will do a far better job. What I learned with Mike Bloomberg is the reason why Mike was broadly popular kind of once he got going, and the reason why that changed in the 3rd term is up until the term limits change, which again, I will take, I'm literally the one that ran the bill, so I'm as tied to this as anyone. But with that said, up until then, I think even the New Yorkers who really did not like Mike would say that they believed he was making what he believed to be the right choices for New York City every time. They might have hated him. They might have thought he was a plutocrat or a fascist or whatever the far left was calling him back then. But nonetheless, I know this because I was around him. He did what he believed to be true, even when it was not in his political interest. Like, for example, the one that jumps out at me the most is when, and Mike is Jewish, keep in mind, but after 9/11, people were attempting to build a mosque right by Ground Zero, and Mike, so it was highly, highly controversial, to say the least, and Mike supported it. Mike said they have a First Amendment right to be here, and, I don't really care what their politics are, and I don't even know that their politics were necessarily anti-American, but nonetheless, it was a mosque at the time, and he supported it anyway. And so, to me, if I'm Zohran, think about it this way. This is his legacy. It's not a stepping stone. Life is fickle. Weird things happen in politics all the time, like Zohran Mamdani, right?
Right.
But the more that he acts like this is the last office he'll ever hold and the best office he'll ever hold, and the more he just does what he thinks is right, no matter what the electoral impacts are, the better of a mayor he'll be, the better his chances, ironically, will be at re-election, and the better of a legacy he'll have.
So your second point is that you will have to make a lot of people unhappy to be effective. Explain what you mean by that.
Again, this is sort of that same point with de Blasio, which is de Blasio is a very smart politician, and he understood that of the 282,000 people that voted for him in the primary in 2013, as long as he basically had them and the relevant interests around them okay, he was going to get reelected, and he did. And he managed to keep his base happy, but at the expense of New York City as a whole. Zohran's walking into a mayoralty with a budget deficit next year of somewhere between $4 and $6 billion. It's unlikely the state gives him any sort of tax increase. He could, with the city council, raise property taxes, but that is politically much, much more difficult than raising taxes on the 1%. If you raise taxes on the 1%, no one feels for them. Obviously, you lose taxpayers, but
right.
No one feels bad about them. You raise property taxes just because New York City is so expensive. You could have someone making $90,000 a year who sees their property tax bill go up $2,000 or $3,000, and that is like the difference for them between like food security and not, potentially, right? Like, it's a huge difference. So it's not going to be that easy, which means he has to cut. And his supporters, and we'll get into this a little more later, are going to urge him to cut from the NYPD. They're the third biggest agency by budget. But that only leads to a worse New York. It leads to
Why
higher
are you
crime.
targeting the NYPD? Why is
Because the DSA, who is his biggest supporters, when we talk about making people unhappy, his base, and we'll have a whole separate column on this in a few minutes, is all about defunding the police. Zohran, now he's walked all of it back since, but for a long time in his career, it was all about defunding the police. You can say that as a legislator who has no actual responsibility. When you are the mayor and the NYPD reports to you, it's a different story, because every time that you defund the police and someone is murdered or raped or assaulted or anything else, that is your actual fault.
Right.
Unions eventually all endorsed him for mayor. A lot endorsed Cuomo in the primary, but pretty much everyone's endorsed him, with a handful of exceptions, in the general. And they're not going to want any changes. They're not going to want any efficiencies. They're not going to want any savings. They're not going to want any layoffs. And he's going to have to do it, because you can't cut $4 to $6 billion without doing that. Most of the city's workforce is unionized. And by the way, this is true of the PBA as well. So there's going to be a lot of hard choices. And the important thing is that they are his choices. He needs to show right away that he's not controlled by anyone. Yeah, he's young, but he's not controlled by a union or a political party or an interest group or other politicians. He's got to show that he makes his own choices based on what he believes is truly best for the city.
The reelect is different from the election.
Yeah, I mean, elections are about change. Elections are about your long-term vision. Re-elections are actually pretty simple, which is how do the voters feel about the city and how do they feel about you, right? And if they feel good about the city, you're going to win. Or if enough of them feel good about you and no one else formidable runs, you're going to win. But if your whole strategy is to keep a tiny group of people happy and sort of box everyone out, you're already a failed mayor. So, like, what's the point of that? And if you just look back at the history, 1997, Giuliani had an amazing first term, he got reelected. 2005, Bloomberg had an amazing first term, he got reelected. 2009, Bloomberg had a great second term, but we did overturn term limits, I mentioned earlier. And, people really didn't like that. And we also had the Great Recession happening exactly that moment while Mike was one of the wealthiest men in the world. And we won because the city was still well run, but it definitely was harder. De Blasio was beatable in 2017, but no one had the balls to run against him. And Adams couldn't even run as a Democrat or ultimately as an independent in this election. So the re-elect is, you got to get the quality of life issues right. The city has to feel safe and clean and well run. And if you do that, not only will people be happy with you, but they'll be open to you. So if you have other ideas, because Zohran has big ideological ideas, and I think that people would not necessarily begrudge them by and large, but if he says, well, you have 5 city-owned grocery stores now, but there's homeless, going to the bathroom everywhere, and there's, chaos, like no one cares, right? If the city feels good and safe, then it's like, sure, what else can you do? And you give him a chance.
He's decided to keep Jesse Tisch. You think that's a good idea?
I think it's a great idea for a lot of reasons. And I think what it signals to me is he does seem to get it, right? He gets that the city has to feel clean and safe and well run, and he has to focus on quality of life, right? So he has a plan to deal with the homeless and the mentally ill. I know a lot of people don't like that plan, but I will say it's not like the current plan is working.
Right.
So I'm not against trying something different. If that's not working after a period of time, then try something else. But still, we talk this a lot in the podcast, but scaffolding, weed shops, e-bikes, shoplifting, he needs to focus on all of that as well.
It's really good to surprise people. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I just think it's very easy to stereotype him, right? He's just AOC part 2, but smiles more than she does. And I don't think just being kind of pigeonholed as this super progressive robot is good for him, right? I don't think it's a good way to govern. And I think he should go the other way a little bit. So like his first day of the city will be sometime probably the end of January. He should have a big jobs announcement lined up. And he should say, here are some regulations that the city has that are just bad for business, and I'm cutting them because we care about jobs, right? Do something unexpected. Don't just sort of do the normal shtick, because then you let people stereotype you really easily. And at the same time, ever since Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote that book, every politician everywhere says they want a team of rivals, and then pretty much nobody ever actually does it, because they ultimately it's uncomfortable to sort of run an 8 a.m. morning meeting with the deputy mayors and the commissioners arguing. And look, if it's chaos and you can't run it, that's bad. But if you are a good leader, you want dissenting points of view. You want to be able to sort of hear all the different things, and then you want to make a decision. And when you make the decision, you want to be firm enough that once it is made, everyone is rowing in the same direction. And if someone is still causing problems, you fire them.
Don't look at social media.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously he's used it to incredible effect, and his team should obviously keep doing it. I'm not saying they should drop off of social media, but let's say they're projecting a high of 1.9 million voters as of this morning. So that's about like 21, 22% of the city's population. That still means 78, 79% of people didn't even bother to vote, right? Now, some of them are kids, they're not citizens yet, but still. That is, you have to run the city for all 8.5 million people. Otherwise, you're just Trump, right? Trump runs the city, runs the country for the people who voted for him, and then actively tries to hurt everyone else. Mm-hmm. That is bad leadership. Good leadership is saying, I don't care how you voted, you live here, you're my responsibility. And when you read social media, it just puts you in this bubble that completely distorts your view of reality, and Twitter or Blue Sky is not reality.
You advised that he became a one-man tourist
I
bureau?
kind of just like
Sounds
this.
like
It's funny. I thought about taking this one out of the letter because it does feel less important. But
does it?
I mean, just in the sense that it's a very specific piece of advice. Right. It's not sort of the big picture stuff that the rest of it is. But I just think that if you look at his personality, he has the incredible ability to be this sort of pitchman for New York City that could be really appealing. That's when his short form videos could really be fantastic. Mm-hmm. And also, again, for a guy who is seen as a socialist and anti-jobs, if he's like, hey, I was able to help increase tourism by X% in part because of all my personal effort, I think that's great, and I think he should try it.
What does he do about the city council?
I just think he should think carefully. This is the final one of this piece, which is the temptation will be to put his thumb on the scale and pick the next speaker. At the moment, there are, as I understand it, 2 leading candidates, Julie Menon, who's from the Upper East Side, and Crystal Hudson from Brooklyn. And then other people still emerge, oftentimes. And he could probably throw the election either way if he sort of got on the phone and started making promises and calls and everything else. I would just be a little careful if I was him, in the sense that I think there's some value in the council absorbing some heat, running interference for you, whether they mean to or not. You can still structure it that way either way. And just some independence, right? So when they fuck up, you don't own all of it. You are not beholden to all these people because you made all these promises for the speaker. You don't own the speaker, which means maybe you have a little less influence, but on the flip side, you don't have to constantly be in their corner either. So I just think that their instinct will be to do what every mayor does, and I think if I were them, I would just think twice.
Okay. So that's sort of the last of your points about...
Yeah, the first column.
What do you... like, let's say Zohran reads this.
Yes, unlikely, but yes, sure.
What's the impression you want him to take away from all this? You've been very detailed
just
about
that he ran
stuff.
Mayor Cuomo, ironically the father of Zohran's opponent, said, you govern in poetry, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose.
Right.
And I think that's what I want him to understand, which is you ran a great race. All credit to you and your team for it. Governing is totally different, and you have to look at the world differently. Now, I will say, in the little bit of time that I spent with him, I think he seems to, at least he understands that that's what I want him to think he sees, and he's good enough to at least make me believe that. But it's really like, look, man, you pick the best job in politics, you pick the worst job in politics, and the best thing you can do for yourself is just to be amazing at the job and don't worry about politics.
So we're on to the second part of the package, which is called Advice to the 20-somethings Joining Mamdani City Hall.
Yes, he's got a lot of his whole core team, at least on the campaign, are really young people in their 20s. And they've done a great job. I mean, in terms of the job of electing someone, I don't really know how much fault you could find with them. The general election wasn't as good as the primary, but overall they've done a great job, which means some of them are going to join City Hall, and some of them are going to be in senior roles. I don't expect them to be deputy mayors necessarily because they don't know about operations, but they're going to be, comms director, chief of staff, press secretary, senior advisor, those kinds of things. But there are a few things specifically that if I were these 20-somethings that I would really keep in mind. And the first and most important is to be responsive, right? There's a 300,000 workforce for the city of New York. That is the same size as CVS, or Apple, or Lowe's, right? That's how big it is. And it doesn't matter how great of a campaign you ran. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are at TikTok. You are as good as the people who work for you or who work in the agencies that you oversee. And the best way to earn their trust and get their best work is to be responsive. No one on Zohran's team is that busy or that important that they can't get back to commissioners and assistant commissioners and their own staff and council members and people like that every day. I had a rule that the day was not complete unless every email was dealt with, every text was dealt with, every phone call returned, or I chose not to return any of those, but I thought about it and just not do it. And the next day's to-do list was written. And I worked 80-hour weeks consistently. And you know what? It was hard for a lot of reasons. Working for Blagojevich was really hard. But thank God I did, because I had this one-time opportunity in my life to effectively run a state, the fifth biggest state in the country, and I made the absolute most of it. And just to put a fine point on this, when you get back to people promptly, you save them time, they feel heard and respected, you know a lot more about what's going on, and then when you say no, which you're going to frequently, they take it a lot better if they felt heard. This is true across life, not just in politics. If they feel ignored and then don't get what they want, they get upset and they start causing trouble. If they feel heard and they hear no, they live with it.
So one of your points here also is don't hire people just like you. Is that something you fear that Mamdani is going to be doing?
Yeah, just because it's fun to work with your friends. They pulled off this win. Maybe they'll have some sort of mandate, which I don't think really matters operationally, but I think they will think it matters. And they want people to think like them. They're true believers. These are hardcore ideologues. But again, this is an operational job. They need people who make sure the clean water runs through the tap, that the trash gets picked up, that the lights turn from green to red. And then when that stuff goes wrong, because something will every single day, that they know what to do about it, right? And if everyone there is a 25-year-old who went to Oberlin and is popular on Blue Sky, the city is going to be an absolute disaster. So they have to get people who have real experience. And by the way, a lot of people for whom they probably don't have a strong point of view about trans girls in sports one way or the other. It doesn't fucking matter. If you are the buildings commissioner, the question is, are the permits being issued properly and are the buildings safe? That's it.
Be nice to reporters, you say?
Yeah, I've kind of always, I started my career in comms. I generally like reporters. There are some reporters who are assholes. There are human beings who are assholes. That's fine. But overall, I tend to like reporters, so maybe I'm biased here. But I just think that if you generally work well with reporters and you are candid and you don't lie and you are accessible as much as you can be, that will ultimately get you the benefit of the doubt. It will give you more chance to be heard and to make your case. And so I just think it's worth it. Eric Adams tried the opposite, which was they were at war with the media from day one and they lost. I mean, for a guy who literally couldn't even make it to the ballot, I don't know what else to tell you about a failed comm strategy, but this is one of the single worst planned and executed comm strategies I've seen of any elected official ever. And some of it might be unfair. Some of it might be racism, like the mayor says. A lot of it was incompetence on it.
Mamdani does seem to have a very soft touch. I mean,
I think so.
Reporters seem to like him.
I think he'll be good at it. But when you get to City Hall, here's the problem. You will feel attacked all the time because that's just the way the job goes. And it is very easy to develop a bunker mentality. And then once you do, I think you're fucked. And let me throw out one crazy idea.
Okay.
So when I was in Illinois, I got rid of every agency's press office, and I created one big central press office. And by doing that, we got rid of lots of crappy people. We gained total control over the messaging. We really improved the quality and speed of response reporters. They were very skeptical at the beginning, but I think ultimately they came around to it. And we coordinated the message a lot better across all of the agencies. So
there are, just like every agency has a comms person.
Yeah. So I got rid of all of them. The only ones I kept two. PD, state police, because it's not like NYPD. It's just about like
public information,
traffic accidents. Right. Like really, honestly, 90% of it is like on I-40 there was an accident and 2 lanes are closed. Like that's most of it. And then the Department of Children and Family Services, which is ACS here. For reasons that are too complicated, the commissioner of that agency convinced me, and I think that was probably right.
You mentioned bunker mentality.
Yeah.
When you're getting attacked, when you were in any role, whether it was in Illinois or in City Hall here in with Bloomberg, what would you tell yourself and your team when you feel like you're getting attacked on all sides? Like, how do you get through those
It's hard
challenges?
because you have moments where you are being treated unfairly, or the people attacking you are fucking idiots, or they're corrupt, or whatever it is. And by the way, sometimes the answer is to respond with extreme force, right? Sometimes when someone's down, you do hit them again because you need to make the point, but you do that as a form of deterrence, right? You want to show people that you are not to be fucked with. And then once you show them that, typically things will work a lot better. Blagojevich, to his great credit, in the first year, because he came in with a huge kind of mandate and honeymoon and all of that, we kind of dictated the budget, and I kind of pulled a fast one on the legislature, and we kind of controlled it, and the speaker was really angry. And the next year, he was like, I'm not giving them their budget no matter what. And I think he assumed that because Rod was lazy, Rod would fold, and he misunderstood him. And we had the longest overtime. So we weren't shut down, I don't think, but we had a budget overtime. And I think certain functions were not funded, actually. And I think Madigan, the speaker, who's now in prison, believed we would eventually fold. And Rod just didn't, right? We just kept going and going and going. And the funny thing is, Rod, who never liked to work, loved this and campaigned like crazy for his budget. And then eventually the way that we won was Madigan was also the chair of the Illinois Democratic Party at the time. And the 2004 presidential convention in Boston was happening. It's one where Obama gave that sort of magnificent speech that kind of launched him. And as the head of the party, Madigan had to go to the convention, and Rod said, nope, we're in session, no one's going to the convention. And Madigan folded, and we got our budget.
Wow.
So it's worth it sometimes, but sometimes it's not, and that's just, it's being thoughtful. The next one is called Say No. This maybe is the most important one for this section in a way. I mean, I think Be Responsive is in reality, but my situation in Illinois was extreme because it was Illinois, and it was Rod Blagojevich, and it was Mike Madigan, like everyone was a fucking crook. But putting that aside, New York City has its share of corruption too, right? Eric Adams was indicted. De Blasio was almost indicted to the point where the U.S. Attorney and the DA had a press conference to explain why they were not indicting him, but that it was close. And you're going to face situations where you're asked to do something at least unethical, if not illegal, right? And I would say, and I'll just read this directly, saying yes is the beginning of the end of your career. You have a conscience, you know right and wrong, and if you know it's wrong, say no and tell someone about it. Do not be a good soldier and keep your mouth shut. Do not assume that the political upside for the mayor or his agenda is so great that it's worth doing something illegal to achieve it. And do not assume that the upside for you, personally, professionally, economically, is ever good enough to risk your career and freedom over.
Along the same lines, you talk about do not get captured by the system.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the one point before for Zohran to stay off social media. These people are not going to stay off social media, but then as a result, they're even more vulnerable, right? Because for them, blue sky is reality, right? They live in this very narrow world of progressives and hipsters, and that's fine for the way they lived their lives before. It was even fine in some ways for the campaign, but for two reasons it's not fine now. The first is, if you live in a world that's just based around likes and retweets and posts and stuff like that, that's a world that will fail. But more importantly, like, what a missed opportunity, right? You're working in the leadership of the most diverse city in the world. It has the 8th largest GDP of any economy in the world. It's home to the world's biggest, and many of them, most high-profile industries. Pretty much everyone on the planet is aware of New York City. Odds are you're never going to have a job like this again, right? So take full advantage of it. Meet as many as people possible. Talk to people who don't already agree with you. Travel around the city. Learn. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you really got to make the most of it.
We're switching to our third category,
Yes,
Zohran and the Jews, the third rail here.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to read the first part of this also, which is, here's what no member of the Israeli Knesset has ever done. They're about to cast a critical vote, and then they stop suddenly and say, wait, before I decide what to do, what does the mayor of New York City think? No one in power in Israel cares what our mayor, whoever it is, thinks about Israel. From 1948 until 2025, basically, it was politically smart for New York politicians to be pro-Israel. And that's why you had Jewish politicians who were pro-Israel, and that's why you had Catholic politicians who were pro-Israel, and everyone else. The reality is this: that has changed. I know Jews in New York are unwilling to sort of accept this, or at least not Jews in New York, because a lot voted for Mamdani, but Jews that I tend to talk to. But here's the reality. Israel is really unpopular. It's unpopular among the far left. It's unpopular among Americans overall. It's unpopular with many mainstream American Jews. I'm a fervent Zionist, right? I see that as a tragedy, but electorally, you can't, up till now, be like, of course we're going to go to Israel. Of course we're going to have a press conference. Of course we're going to show up at the synagogue, because those are the politics, and then deny the shifting of reality. Reality has shifted to, we're criticizing Israel in New York City, or I would say in a lot of at least left-leaning electorates, is a more popular, politically intelligent position than to praise Israel. That's the reality of it. And look, I actually believe Mamdani genuinely dislikes Israel, right? I think a lot of progressive Democrats just chase the hot issue. I think he truly believes this. He has for most of his life. I think he believes that Israelis are colonizers. I don't think he wants a Jewish state, at least where it physically sits now. But with that said, I don't think that anyone in Israel who makes decisions cares at all about the mayor either way.
I understand that they don't care, but we're in an environment where, with Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and this kind of
how many people voting in the New York City election listen to Tucker Carlson?
No, I'm sure not very many. But my point is that in New York City, do you want a clear voice for support for Jews, that New York City is a safe place?
That's different. So that's the point of this column.
Okay.
They're two different things. If New York City is not safe for Jews under Mamdani, and he has his views on Israel, then he is flat out an anti-Semite and a failed mayor. But this is the point. There is a clear distinction. So invariably, sometime in his first few months, a synagogue will be defaced, or a Jewish-owned store will be vandalized, or someone wearing a yarmulke is going to be attacked on the street. And what he needs to do is go way over the top in his response. Send 5 times as many cops as you need. Send Jesse Tisch. Go to the synagogue himself. Have a press conference, vowing to catch the perpetrators and demand justice. He needs to make the case overwhelmingly so because of his position.
But doesn't he need to do it way before that? I mean, I feel like making an over-the-top response.
But it's all nonsense, right? Like he says that now, but until it happens, it doesn't mean anything, right? It will only matter when something actually happens. But when it does happen, he has to realize that this is not just about addressing an individual case of vandalism or assault, but it's to make the case to the Jewish people of New York City that we can count on him when it comes to our safety. And if we can do that, and if Jews feel physically safe here, some will still hate him for his views on Israel, but that's okay. That's the political choice he has to make. But if Jews feel safe, they will be happy here, just like if the city feels clean and safe and well run, people of every origin are going to be happy. And if they're not, they're not.
We're on to our fourth piece. What reporters covering Zohran should keep in mind?
Yeah,
should we call him Zohran or Mamdani? What do you think? What gets somebody a first name?
I feel like he's a Zohran.
He's a Zohran?
In the sense that he has this familiarity and appeal and charisma that
you feel familiar.
You do, right? Like Mike Bloomberg
Rudy.
We called him Mike. Rudy was Rudy, but Mike was really Bloomberg, right?
Yeah, he wasn't Mike. Not to the public.
I think you just have to pronounce his name correctly. Either one, first name or last name, as long as you
it's not pronounced Zohran?
No, it is.
Oh, okay.
You are. So I'm saying if someone keeps on mispronouncing Mamdani, as some people have, that's bad. Say either first name or last name and just say it right.
Sure. So I've been interested. Hugo, you were a reporter for a long time. I was on the government side of the comms.
I wasn't really a reporter, but I did work in the media. Journalism.
You were a journalist.
Yeah. And I didn't go to mayoral press conferences.
And Corey was on the government side of this. So the first thing is, Zohran's a human being, right? He's not the second coming, and he's not the devil. He's never going to be as pure as supporters want him to be, and he's never going to be as crazy or evil or bad as opponents say he is. The more they cover him as a full-fledged human rather than a half-fictional figure, good or bad, the more interesting the coverage. Easy reporting is using the caricature and then getting affirmation and attention for it online from all the usual suspects. Good reporting is portraying people as the complex characters they are, good and bad. If progressive reporters think they have to affirm him at all times, their coverage will become extremely tedious extremely quickly. If other reporters believe that their only job is to undermine him at all times, same thing. Just do the actual job that made you choose journalism in the first place.
It's interesting to compare Zohran to AOC and sort of how they came to prominence. It felt like, I guess the mainstream press missed AOC too until she won.
Yeah.
But I guess how is the relationship different? Do you think? How would you compare the way the press deals
I think the way she's covered is what I just said they shouldn't do. Right? Either you're on the left and she's a hero, or you're on the right and she's Satan, and she's neither one. And there are times where she has good and courageous views. There are times where she's a totally self-serving politician hypocrite. Mm-hmm. Both things are true about her, just like good and bad things are true about everybody. The difference is, at the end of the day, she's just an advocate. She's just a voice. She is not a major figure in Congress, and Congress doesn't do very much. She's a major figure in that she gets attention, but you never hear about a bill happening that she was behind the scenes in the room crafting. She might try to claim that occasionally to give her legitimacy, but she's an activist, right? When you're the mayor, you run shit.
Right.
And your views, honestly, on trans this or abortion or whatever else don't fucking really matter.
So do you think this is a budding rivalry as he has this obviously real job?
Who knows? The scuttlebutt, and I don't know AOC at all, it never mattered, but was that she actually liked Lander personally and would have liked to endorse him, but because of her base, she couldn't. Mm-hmm. I think he's more of a risk to her than anything. So let's say he's a disaster and she wants to primary Schumer in 28. If I'm Chuck, I go all over New York and I hang Mamdani around her neck like an albatross and say, if you like New York City, vote for AOC. Same thing as she runs for president. So she needs to be successful, and we'll get into that in one of the next columns, which is she needs to be the one giving him space to do his job. If the DSA are the purists that they usually are, and they just pound on him incessantly whenever he doesn't do exactly what their position is, he's going to be in a mess very, very quickly, and that's ultimately going to put her in a mess. So the best thing she can do for herself is to be the fullback or the offensive lineman or whatever it is and give him as much room as you can.
So maybe that goes right into our next category, which is the sort of Zohran's dilemma.
Let me just...
You want to finish the...
I do a little bit, if you don't mind. So one is reporters, right? And this is true generally, but this was a good chance for me to lecture them a little bit, which is...
I thought you liked reporters.
I do, but at the same time, I think there are sort of two types of reporters today, and feel free to disagree. I think there are those who want to just cover the news as fairly as they can and let the story speak for itself, and there are those who want to use their reporting to get on TV, get on podcasts, get more followers, find new ways to make money, and grow their brand. The latter is a one-person business pretending to be a journalist. The former is actual reporting. And I think that if you want to cover Zohran fairly, success and failure alike, you have to just be a journalist and not make this about you.
Are there some reporters who you turn to for good, unbiased, thoughtful reporting here locally in New York or politics on the whole in the country?
Yeah, I think so. I think I find them a little less in the newspapers and a little more, ironically, on like certain podcasts, like, for example, FAQ with Harry Siegel and Christina Greer and Katie. Like that would be one where, Katie Honan, where I think they all have points of view, but I think they are very knowledgeable about New York City, and I might disagree with them, but I feel like I know where they're coming from, right? The problem is if you write for the Post, you have to sort of follow that agenda. The Times, to a large extent, I think both it's the other way on the agenda, plus they're all, because they're at the New York Times, not all, but a lot of them have dollar signs in their eyes.
Well, there just seems to be at the Times just this kind of institutional, like they don't really want to care. They just want to.
Well, that's right. One, the New York Times institution doesn't seem to care about New York City.
Yeah.
Number two, the reporters are sort of instinctively left. Number three, all of those reporters care a lot about their social media presence, care a lot about getting on MSNBC, care a lot about getting the right podcasts. And they know that that is a question of affirmation and validation, not a question of journalism. So I think that's the problem. And just one last point on this, and then we'll go to the next one, which is transparency and responsiveness works both ways. To me, this is an important point, which is if you're a reporter, you want access to deputy mayors and commissioners, you want city hall staffers to feel comfortable talking to you, you got to let them do so, which means don't burn them when you know something is off the record. And if you're not sure, ask them. Don't just publish it because they didn't explicitly say the words. If the mayor has a transparent and accessible administration, praise him for it because people like positive reinforcement. When you call the press office with a question, give them sufficient time to comment. And maybe most importantly, the people working in City Hall and the agencies by and large, not all of them, we saw a bunch who were not this way in the Adams administration, but a lot of them, they're working really hard and they're trying to run and create policies and programs that they think will help New Yorkers. So if the mayor and his commissioners are announcing a new initiative and you're a reporter and you show up at the press conference, you completely ignore their hard work. Sometimes they do it in like really arrogant, sort of patronizing ways too. And then they just ask about controversies and scandal and shit talking and politics, nothing that impacts real people in any way, shape, or form. If you don't treat the administration seriously, they're not going to treat you seriously. And if you do treat them seriously, they probably will in return. And if they don't, fuck it, go for it, do what you want. But I really think that there is this just like cynicism among the media in general, and I think especially often among the Room 9 media, which will cover City Hall, that like nothing matters except like whatever little scandal we're, tempest in a teapot we're following today on Twitter. And like, that's bullshit. The stuff that impacts the 8.5 million people who live here is what they're talking about. They could be right. They could be wrong. If they're wrong, you should kill them for it. But nonetheless, ignoring all of it because you'll get more retweets if you talk about some nonsense thing instead, that's bad journalism.
Zohran's dilemma, the poor or his voters. This is something you've written about in the past. We've talked about on the podcast.
But I think he's in a tough spot in that if you talk to him or you listen to him, it seems like he really wants to use his role as mayor to help the people who are least fortunate among us. Mm-hmm. But the problem is his actual voters and the least fortunate among us are two very different groups with competing priorities and conflicting priorities, right? So if you look at we don't know the general election numbers yet, but in the primary, the voters from the lowest income communities, Soundview, Brownsville, East New York, Queensbridge, they supported Andrew Cuomo, not Zohran Mamdani. Mamdani did really well with voters from Park Slope, Williamsburg, Astoria, Jackson Heights, kind of hipster neighborhoods with voters who are predominantly higher income. These are not nearly as high crime as other neighborhoods. And his voters identify very, very proudly, and it's really critical to their whole identity, as extremely progressive. And a lot of them are members of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. But the DSA agenda itself is really not at all aligned with the needs of New York's poorest, right? So there's a few areas to me. One is crime. The people at the DSA are the ones leading the charge. Defund the police, eliminate incarceration, no law enforcement, all of that stuff. And when you talk to people in low-income communities, when you poll, when you go to focus groups, whatever else, they have the opposite point of view. Yes, everyone wants to be treated respectfully by the police, absolutely, but that is in no way mutually exclusive with having a strong, robust police force that can do its job, that can fight crime, that can keep communities safe. When crime goes up, it's generally not the people in Park Slope who are paying for it, it's the people in Brownsville. Right. Especially the people who are not the gentrifiers. And therefore, picking the evil gentrifiers, which ironically is the vast majority of Mamdani supporters, ahead of the people who live there and are really suffering from high crime is wrong. The problem is, as we discussed, there's going to be this big deficit. And his supporters are going to say, cut from the NYPD. That's where we can have savings. And you've already seen this debate over 40,000 cops versus 34,000 cops, which is a big difference right there. To satisfy his base, he will do that. To satisfy and help the poorest among us, he will not do that. And the same is true for taxes, right? So Mamdani's campaign very predominantly features raise the personal income tax on the 1% and raise the corporate tax. And here's the problem. If you're in the 80th percent, you don't like the 1%, you don't care about the 1%, but you don't think about the 1%, right? You're trying to put food on the table, you're trying to make rent, you're trying to pay the electric bill. And the people who hate the 1%, they're the 8th percent, the 13th percent, the 19th percent. Zohran wins votes from progressives for his policies on higher taxation. But here's the problem. If you are truly poor and you need social services like Medicaid or public assistance or public housing, you just want the city to have as much money as possible to spend on those programs. And a recent Citizens Budget Commission report found that New York City's share of America's millionaires dropped from 12.7% in 2010 to 8.7% in 2022. The difference in the annual budget for the city and state, $13 billion in tax revenue. That's the entire deficit. Mamdani's entire child care program, his entire buses program, everything he wants to do, right there alone. So yes, if you make the base happy because they are just angry that they're not in the 1% and they want social justice, then you can do that. Now, always not going to give it to you at least next year anyway, but you can push for it. But what it truly ultimately means is less money for NYCHA, less money for Medicaid, less money for TANF. And if you do those things, you are hurting the people who need the help the most.
So let me ask you a big picture question. If you read the sort of the national kind of political coverage, if you read someone like Andrew Sullivan or Peggy Noonan, people like that, there's this sort of idea that we're about to live in a different city. When Mamdani takes over, New York is and I'm curious, so you disagree with that premise?
I mean, these are people who live in Washington. I don't know Andrew Sullivan's, but I assume he lives in Washington. Peggy Noonan certainly does.
Andrew Sullivan lives in Washington.
Yeah, of course. They don't fucking know New York. And by the way, they're if they're not from here, they're they act like they're tough guys and they're so sophisticated. They're intimidated by New York. They don't understand it. They look at it from this macro political lens. Here's the reality of it. Whether you like him or not, his impact is far more limited on the kind of stuff they're talking about than you realize. So, number one, socialism. He's a socialist. That's fine. We accept that. He can't raise taxes. He doesn't control interest rates. He doesn't control the global supply chain. The only really significant impact that the mayor of New York City has on the economy is quality of life and public safety.
Right. Which you've been talking about,
which
is pretty huge.
Huge, but I think he gets it, right? That's the question. It seems like he does. We'll see how he does with it. But if the city is clean and safe, the economy is fine because then the private sector is making its own decisions. Mike Bloomberg saw his job, and Mike Bloomberg knew a lot more about the economy than Andrew Sullivan or Peggy Noonan, right? Was to create a template, a clean, safe, well-run template that tourists could visit, businesses could come here, people would choose to live here, and interesting things would happen. And when you do that, it can work. When you let it fall to shit, then it doesn't. And then the next thing would be Israel. Again, we already discussed this. No one gives a fuck in Israel. By the way, if you talk to Israelis lately, and Corey, I don't know what your feedback has been, they don't give a fuck right now what anyone in America thinks about anything. When I talk to Israelis, their basic answer is, fuck you. I don't care that you American Jews don't like us right now. You don't know what it's like. You don't know what we've been through. I don't want to hear it.
Right.
That is my consistent
But that seems secondary to me to the other point about the safety of Jews in the United States.
Correct.
Which is, again, he does have some...
He's going to have these critical moments. Do you keep the city safe or not? The first test he had was reappointing Jesse Tisch. He said he wants to do that. Right. Great. The next one will be in the budget. With Jews, it will be when something bad happens to a Jew or a Jewish institution in New York City, how do you handle it? Right. So I just think the people, I have to admit, I haven't read Andrew Sullivan and Peggy Noonan, so maybe their comments are very specifically about, cutting the middle third of the $6 billion budget deficit and which agency should specifically bear these types of cuts and whatever else.
No, I don't think it is.
But assuming that's not the case, I would argue they know what the fuck they're talking about.
So one name that has been conspicuously absent from this discussion so far is Donald Trump. And I'm curious what you see.
I'm sure that their pieces are all about that, right? Well, I don't think it matters.
You don't think it matters?
Nah, okay. I mean, I think, look, he and Zohran are made for each other. Zohran's going to fight with him. Trump's going to fight with Zohran. It is so. The reason why.
But it's not a fair fight, right? I mean,
it is. No. First of all, the reason why, like the New York Post and all the people backing Cuomo and Adams were just so fucking clueless is like, Trump's going to settle this. He's going to get Adams a job as ambassador of Saudi Arabia and Sliwa something else, and Cuomo.
Well, I think you made the good point that Trump is perfectly fine having
very
Mamdani
happy.
be married.
He is Zohran's
that doesn't
biggest
mean he's
supporter.
No,
he's going to kick the living shit out of him every day. But that's why.
But that's going to be tough for us, right?
Well, yes and no. So like, there are some specific things he could do. So like the Gateway Tunnel funding would be a big one. Now that's not just New York City. That's New Jersey.
I'm confused about that. Didn't he cut it already? Like,
yeah, but that would be one. But like that's the entire.
Is it gone or is it just?
Well, I don't know. But you know what? Again,
it's. I saw some people who work for Gateway. They said they're still moving forward.
Yeah,
he just gave a speech.
Right, gave a speech, and ultimately keep in mind that maybe he just hates the entire Northeast corridor, but. The Gateway Tunnel affects everyone on Amtrak from Boston to D.C., right? It is not just New York City or New Jersey or wherever else. So, but he could cut infrastructure, or he could try to, right?
Right.
Congress obviously has some role here too. So if the House does flip, his ability to budgetarily do things is a lot more limited. I know that everyone wants to think that there's this huge interplay between the president and the mayor. There's just not.
Okay.
Right? I've worked in city government. I've worked in state government.
So you don't think Trump will invent some new ways to?
I think he'll try to. I think a lot of them will be unconstitutional and get struck down.
Okay.
I think a lot of it will suck up tons of attention and energy and press coverage. Zohran will not take the bait every time. He will deliberately choose to because it is good for him.
Right.
And they will engage in endless public warfare.
And you just think
when it comes to the actual operations and functioning of New York City, at the moment, I think that there will be a ton of smoke and not a lot of fire.
Okay.
That is my view. I could be wrong.
Can I have, we're moving to the next category. And I think when people read your magazine, this next one is about the partnership for New York City and what Steve Fulop, who's the current mayor of Jersey City, should do. Tell me how this piece fits into...
Is he still the mayor?
Yeah, he's still the mayor.
Oh.
He's still the mayor.
Okay.
People reading your magazine, it's very focused on Mamdani, the future of New York. Tell me why you think that this piece, as you intro it, fits into this magazine
because
as
the
a whole.
reason why Mamdani won, not the reason, is there is no centrist equivalent of the DSA or the WFP or May 3rd. So the far left, I disagree with many of their views. I find a lot of their intolerance unacceptable, a lot of their sort of emotional posturing wildly cynical and hypocritical. Putting all of that aside, I've been working in and around New York City politics since the mid-'90s, and that's when all these groups were kind of starting to come into existence. They work hard. They recruit candidates. They train candidates. They organize. They do grassroots. They figure out policy that actually matters to people who vote. The center does nothing. So for 12 years during the Bloomberg world, it didn't matter that much because you had Mike Bloomberg with endless money and obviously understood business better than anyone. And then a team of really talented political people around him who could execute on it. Fine. But Mike hasn't been mayor now for 12 years. And literally the business community has been an absolute joke, starting with the New York City Partnership. So the New York City Partnership is a group of CEOs who represent giant companies that are based in New York City, and they think that they matter a lot politically. And the funny thing is they actually matter more nationally than they do locally. The partnership does not do politics. They would tell you that it is beneath them, that it is dirty, that they don't do that. The only thing they do is raise money, and as they're hopefully, although I doubt it, learning in this election is money doesn't solve every problem. They've thrown tons of money at Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams, and it's meant nothing. So therefore, until someone starts doing the same hard work that the left does, you're never going to have a bench. You're never going to have really good candidates sort of systematically being run for city council, state reps, state senate, people who then could advance to mayor, to governor, to Congress. And the left is ultimately always going to dominate because they're the only ones doing the actual work. They're the only ones who really understand local politics. Fulop was an unexpected choice, but in some ways one that I'm excited about because he does know politics. He's been elected several times. He did run for governor of Jersey in the primary. He lost, as did, full disclosure, my brother-in-law. But nonetheless, he gets it, right? And he understands, I assume, and I don't know him, but we'll talk, I hope or assume that we will at some point, that politicians at every level, but especially local level, only care if you can impact their next election. The Partnership for New York truly believes, and when you go to Staten Island and tell someone, they never go to Staten Island. When you meet with a member from Staten Island, you tell them, Jamie Dimon thinks this, that matters. Nobody gives a fuck. The market care what Jamie Dimon thinks, sure. My business reporter, sure. My Scott Bessent, sure. No councilman, no state rep, no state senator. They barely, even if they know who Jamie Dimon is, they don't care at all.
It's pretty hard though for the center to organize, right? Don't organization movements come from the from the fringes?
Yeah, but again, we don't
nature of it.
So maybe the grassroots is harder, but think about like in the kind of stuff we talked about this partnership. You don't think that organization could have organized arguably hundreds of thousands of parents, if not more, around the illegal weed shops. Yeah. Right. Like there's so many local issues.
I think you're totally
that I think
right. You're totally right about
be
that.
Organized.
I guess the thing is the thing that you accuse the sort of partnership of doing is what I think a whole Substack of New York does.
They're wrong.
They think about, we can move to California or we can spend more time at our house.
Okay, but the Partnership for New York City is definitely for New York City. It's in their name.
Yeah.
Right. So they can't spend their house. I mean,
I guess what I'm saying is I wonder if there's just a disengagement that goes way beyond the partnership.
So there's two ways. First of all, it's the partnership, it's REBNY, it's ABNY, it's all these groups. But the partnership to me is the biggest offender. REBNY at least is only supposed to be for real estate interests. They're not even effective at that. Right. But nonetheless, at least to their credit, they don't pretend to care about anyone but themselves. Right. There's two possibilities. One, Fulop sees it and he remakes the partnership. Mm-hmm. I think intellectually he will more than get that. I think that there will be tons of resistance from Kathy Wild, who's currently in charge and sticking around for a while, from the board, from the staff. The institution clearly sees it differently. Kathy has heard me criticize her for this before. Right. She doesn't change her position. She just thoroughly rejects it, right? If Fulop is truly a great leader, if he truly has balls, if he truly has vision, he will make this happen anyway. And that might mean you fire most of the staff. It might mean that you have conflict with the board. You do it. If he just wants to go to parties and make, job pays like $1.5 million a year or something like that, I heard, and feel important and not accomplish anything, great. That's what the job's already set up to do. But if you want to do something, if not, you take all these people that have thrown at this point tens of millions of dollars in just wasted money at Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams. And if you just said, put 5 million in, 10 at most, and build this organization, you could do that. Right. And then you could actually have a bench, real candidates, all of those things. And they don't. So I am hopeful that Fulop will see this and he will do this. I don't know so. If he doesn't, I'm hopeful that someone else will. I understand the question on your mind right now might be, why don't you just do it? And I could, I think, in the sense that I think I know what to do and we have the organizational ability to do it. But you know what? I'm doing fucking mobile voting. I'm doing hunger. I do all this individual stuff in New York, like scaffolding and broker's fees and weed shops and school meals and everything else. I'm one person. It's enough. Would I join with other people in building this? Absolutely. But I have to say, I'm one guy and there's only so much I can do.
So let's put a concluding thought on this. How would you rate your sort of sense of optimism about the Mamdani administration?
I didn't vote. I voted this weekend. I voted for Jim Walden. Yep, I did.
Who's not in the race, right?
Nope.
Right.
But for someone who is literally, my job title is venture capitalist. The word capitalist is in my actual job title. Mm-hmm. For someone who's not a Mamdani supporter, not a DSA supporter, frequently a target of the DSA online and things like that. I am far less panicked than Andrew Sullivan or Peggy Noonan or John Catsimatidis or any of these hedge fund guys or anyone else or the New York Post, simply because the job is so much narrower in a way than they seem to understand. The job is about operations. The job is about quality of life. His affordability stuff in and of itself is not inherently evil or bad. I don't think it can be accomplished the specific way he's outlined it, but that doesn't make
it's not an
childcare subsidization or buses that are free, in and of itself, it's not bad, right? And there are ways to go about it. And one of the pieces in the Substack was one that Jamie Rubin and I wrote right after the primary, kind of saying, okay, we took each other's priorities and said, we don't think they can be done the way he thinks, but here's a way to go about it, right? So I think they're doable. So the question is, does he get it? And by the way, we're going to know the answer in the first few months because a lot of it comes down to hiring. I remember in Mike's first few months, the press complaining, like, you haven't really done anything yet. And he's like, what are you talking about? I did the most important thing by far. I put together the team. They didn't understand that at all, right? They're just like a kid's soccer team where they just chase the ball. But this is where Mamdani sits right now. I think Tish was a really good sign. If he hires people for their operational expertise, and he said on this podcast, maybe he wasn't telling the truth, but he said on this podcast, as long as the person doesn't disagree with me for the thing I'm hiring them to do, I don't care what their politics are. If he means that, I think he could be okay.
So in your adult life, there have been two new mayors who became kind of historical in their way. There was Giuliani.
Yeah.
He obviously fell a long way from there, but certainly in his first term, and then again during 9/11, was a very important leader for New York City. And you had Bloomberg, who you spoke about it quite a bit.
Of course.
Is Mamdani going to be in that sort of category, or is he going to be in the de Blasio category?
Who knows? I mean, I fear de Blasio. I don't think he'll be as bad. I mean, Adams is interesting, right? In that Adams actually, again, if he sat here and we went through 100 policy issues, I don't think that I would have that much disagreement with him on them. The problem was focus and consistent execution. Some people were good. And the biggest problem was what we just said, was just hiring, right? He hired some very good people. We've had a bunch of the deputy mayors on this show, right? Yeah. They hired some really, really corrupt
But still, it
hacks.
took a private citizen, to get the weed shop situation under control.
In the sense that I just sort of pestered him and embarrassed him until he did something about it, yes. But overall, and we got lucky.
Here, stop this blatantly illegal thing from happening.
Then Erica Tanner, who worked for us for years and then went to City Hall, became the person to sort of work on it. So luckily, someone that we knew and that we had trained was able to work on it.
There's City of Yes. There's
there are real accomplishments there because there have been people in this administration who are very, very talented public servants. City of Yes, the guy Dan Garodnick's a perfect example of that. And there are people like Ingrid or Tim Pearson or Phil Banks or Edward Caban or others who were wildly corrupt, and they had way too much power, right? And so if Zohran doesn't hire that way, if he hires truly talented people, I think that he could at the very least be a good mayor. And then history kind of comes to you a bit, right? Like Rudy was historic for a few reasons as mayor. One, he really, really, really did change the safety of New York City, right? It was an absolute cesspool, and he made it the safest big city in America. Two, he was truly remarkable in his leadership during 9/11. I was physically there for a lot of it because I worked for Schumer at the time. We were all kind of in the same place at the same time a lot. Three, other than those two things, I would say that he frequently was a highly chaotic mayor who caused all kinds of issues and problems because he was bored and needed attention, Trump-like in that way. And I think that was part of him too.
Right.
Bloomberg, history kind of came in for him in that he only won because of 9/11. And then he did a really good job remaking the city in the wake of 9/11. And then he ended up doing other things that became historic. The smoking ban was truly historic. The High Line, the campus in Roosevelt Island, all of the rezoning and building that he did was truly historic. So he did some incredible things combined with being this very unique kind of CEO more than anything else, combined with history kind of ushering him in the first place. So with Zohran, we'll see. Things are going to happen really big that are good and bad, and how he responds to them and handles them and what direction he takes the city in will say a lot. But I will say this. Giuliani governed for Giuliani, but it kind of worked more or less. Bloomberg governed based on what he truly thought was in the best interest of New York City. They were his views, obviously. He was the mayor. De Blasio governed for a tiny slice of people who could reelect him. Adams kind of governed in part for the city and in part for his corrupt buddies and in part for his own reelection, like we didn't get into this here, but like union contracts. He just, until Mastro showed up, he just gave them everything they wanted at every turn, thinking this is my way to reelection, and he didn't even get to the fucking ballot. So just to have a mayor that, again, isn't governing for a very, very narrow group of people, whether it's corrupt cronies or hardcore ideologues in Park Slope, by definition, will give him a chance to be historic.
Thanks, brother.
All right, thank you. Firewall is recorded at my bookstore, P&T Knitwear, located at 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We'd love to hear from you with questions, feedbacks, or idea for a guest. Just email me at bradley@firewall.media or find me on LinkedIn. And to keep up with what's on my mind and my latest writing, please follow my new Substack at bradleytuss.substack.com. Thanks again for listening.